Uh, Today, uh, I'm going to conduct this session with the specific purpose of getting into the historical perspective of English language that calls for very detailed kind of description and very long talk. I don't know how long it's going to take for me to brief you about is 1500 years of history. You can see on the slide uh, there is a figure here. His name is John Wycliffe. He is the one, the most prominent among those who helped English not only gain this kind of popularity or strength or a formidable force that it has been reckoned to now, uh, primarily because he had to struggle a lot and he had to actually undergo a lot of traumatic harassment, torture, and he even died for the sake of promoting English language. And the kind of English that we have today is not what we had it 1500 years ago. So while deliberating upon uh, this uh, kind of uh, complete chronological account of how it started and how it's came to be known as one of the global lingua franca with 2 billion plus population, I mean speakers worldwide, and uh, this is really interesting to know that almost a quarter of the globe population, they are the direct or indirect user of this language. Uh, we sometimes may wonder that how come this English has become so prominent and has its sway over the other languages, and actually there's no competition with the other languages because it has left all of them far behind. And this stage was set, this stage reform was set by John Wycliffe because he is the one to have produced the first Bible translation in English. And he was truly a brilliant and courageous cleric, a scholarly individual who went against the norm of or the currents. He went against the currents of the time because Latin was the language of the church, and church used to issue edicts and one has to obey, otherwise it was a cardinal sin of violating church rules. And the church people, they firmly believe that Bible could be read or could be forwarded or assimilated in the society only in its pristine form, without any translation or any kind of modification in the language. So this was a huge challenge for English, and English was subjugated to the state of a second language, not even a second language. In fact, French monarchs, they made sure that English was looked down upon and it didn't become the lingua franca. Only the lowest rung of society, in the underprivileged or the impoverished or non aristocratic brats, those who were peasants or farmers or laborers, or those who had to struggle to earn their livelihood, and those who were debarred from the court rulings and from the church, and they couldn't even have access to the church at the time. So John Wycliffe, he set the tone, and he was the one to produce the first Bible in English, uh, and it was an inspiration, rather inspiration and figurehead for all the other people, those who followed in his footsteps later. He undertook this dangerous and secretive undertaking despite all the threats to his life, and it was done secretly, clandestinely. Mystery still surrounds whether the sudden appearance of numerous hand-copied Bibles among a population, because a handful of Bibles were not printed, because there was no printing press at the time. It was done by scribes, and that was done secretly in certain remote locations, unheard of, unseen, and they were haunted, those who ever indulged in producing a copy of or distributing this. But there were some zealous uh, people like John Wycliffe and on. He had companions, and they went on propagating Christianity among commoners through, and they encouraged, motivated the people to read the Bible in their own language. So that's why I have mentioned his name to be the first among those who had championed the cause and who had really been pioneered in bringing English to the pinnacle of his success, the kind of zenith that it attained, that has become the world lingua franca. Uh, while dealing with the chronological segments or historical perspective, I'm going to divide the entire history of 1500 years into 5 broader categories or stages or phases of English development as a language. The Old English, that probably started in around 500. That's hardly understandable, incomprehensible, and it had an altogether different shape. It was like the gutturals of that time. Then we have the Middle English. Then we have early modern English, followed by late modern English, and then we have the English that we find it in its form today, in all walks of life, and everywhere, whether it's printed, any content that you find it. And we are lucky to have got it in such tailored shape that we don't find it too difficult to either speak or understand, or we don't have incomprehensibility understanding people from either natives or non-natives, or varieties of Englishes that are being used, whether it's in spoken form or in written form, all over the world in one way or the other. And obviously English is like a cementing force. It's a bondage. It connects the whole of the world, the entire population, because tourism, travel, then websites and all the contents, almost 80 to 90% of the content, internet, is to be found only in English. That's cause for the robustness and the strength that this language has attained over these 1500 years. With its inception in 500 years, although we hardly call it English, it was actually an offshoot or a derivative of German tribes, and there were three German tribes, those who invaded England, and after this invasion, they brought with them the language that we find it today. The German is an Indo-European and Uralic language, which has its offshoots all over the globe in different forms. And I'm going to show you this tree simply because it has branched out into all the languages that we find now in different shape, or whatever language you speak now, it's all in the form of one of the offshoots, the derivatives of the Indo-European languages. You see the branching of these trees, this huge tree of the Indo-European, and we have the progenies of all of the offshoots of these languages, whether it's the being used in Europe or Africa or Latin America or Asia or any other parts of the globe. So we have Indo-Iranians, we have Europeans, we have Germanic, other offshoots of Germanic. Germanic is the parent language. So we on the left side we find Punjabi, Sindhi, Pashtun, and Persian, and then we have it is Indo-Iranians or Indo. On the right side we find all those European languages we find in, and basically the local England, they were the Celtic language people, and English, even the name that you hear today, was to be traced back to these three tribes. Those were known as Angles, the Saxons, and the Jutes. They crossed the North Sea from what today is Denmark and northern Germany. Angles came from England, actually not England, it's England. And that England came to be known as, their language was called Englisks, and from which this word England and English are actually derived. So it's these three Germanic languages that have given rise to English. In the olden form, it was not the English that you find it today. From 450 to 1100, when the Old English, it doesn't sound like English at all today, And even the English speakers now would have great difficulty in understanding Old English. Nevertheless, about half of the most commonly used words in modern English have English roots. We can still find the traces of those, the ancestral properties, and the words be like strong and water, all derived from Old English until 1100. That brings it to the Middle English. I'm showing you an example of the Old English. You can see this Beowulf. This is a very long narrative, poetic narrative. It's in poetic form. The author is unknown, anonymous, and even there is a conjecture about what time it really came into being. Roughly, it could be 700 to 800 or 650 to 800. If you try to read this, you'll find some of the letters are familiar, but the rest part is hard to read. Now, if you look at the prominent uh, events that led to its developmental stages, you find some of the glaring events in the history of English language development could be traced back to like Roman invasions and occupation. So beginning of Roman rule of Britain, then we have a settlement of Britain by Germanic invaders begins 449. I'm not going to read all of them because it's a long history of all the major events that we find here. So, but what is important is the earliest known Old English inscriptions. They can be found in uh, uh, these inscriptions like which have been preserved 1150. Uh, in the Old English, you find the Beowulf kind of scripture or manuscript. Then we have earliest known English inscription, Old English 450 480. Then 1066, William the Conqueror, Duke of Normandy, invades and conquers England, and this brings the Germanic conquerors and their invasion and then rule over England for a longer time, with French also invading. So earlier surviving manuscript in Middle Ages, 1150, the English replaced Latin as a language instruction in most schools. This is a landmark and watershed moment in English, because only by 1348 there was an English king. Although most of the English kings, they had their lineage and roots, and they had their relationship with French people, and in fact they preferred to speak French at the time. And they had they used to get commands from their rulers from France, and English was looked down upon as a subsidiary, underrated language. The enslaved ones, not of the. So English wasn't enjoying the kind of reputation that should have been accorded this. So in 1362, English replaces French as the language of law. So instead of French, English was being used for writing some of the instructions, and Parliament started using all the documents the first time in English. And then comes a big event in history of English language development. Chaucer, he's supposed to be the earliest and the most powerful poets among all, and he wrote the Canterbury Tales in 1388. And then there is I'm going to get into details of these events, because they would shape up what we find the English formation and its development, its dynamism, and its beauty, or the kind of embellished language that we have it now. There was a great vowel shift begins in 14. I'm going to talk in details about this, why it matters, and why the vowels, this shift shaped the language, English language, later to be known as one of the finest languages. Now, the next big events technologically is the printing press. First printing press, Gutenberg. William Caxton, he established the first English printing press, early modern, 1476. Obviously, with the printing press, it was easier for copying, and he was multiplying the copies and making it accessible to commoners, or the cheaper price. There used to be like spending a fortune just buying the books, and books were meant for, and it was a prerogative of only the aristocrat. And commoners, they didn't even have, they can, it was like a dream come true for them if they could read Bible in the language they understood. So in 1564, Shakespeare is born, the greatest of the playwrights, around 53 of plays, and I'll show you one of the plays like Hamlet and 4 plays that his reputation as a playwright rests. And no doubt Shakespeare has been the greatest force, greatest influence on spreading and making its writing and its content and its, all the plays were hugely popular. They were made to be played on stage. We had miracle plays, we had mystical plays, and there were theaters born. And you know that the Shakespeare was working for Globe Theatre, and he had to, and that theatre was like natural pastime for the commoners. And obviously, the interest in the plays and all was brought through the stages. They were enacted, there were artists, they used to roam around in the mobile theater. I mean, the theater players and all, they will go in troops to the local places, and they would stay there for a couple of days, and then they will move to another city. This was how the plays were staged and popularized. Now the first English dictionary is published in 1604. Dr. Johnson, the great, who compiled dictionary, but the dictionary was like a baby, a small pocket dictionary at the time, because it included just thousands of word list, because he chose to remove the nouns, and he was of opinion that English should include only action verbs, and passive words shouldn't be included. And in 1607, we find first permanent English settlement in the New World established. And so I'm not going to the other details because this doesn't really make our task easier. I will talk about past. It's the past, English in the past, English in the Middle Ages, English at present, and also talk about what kind of future it holds for us, and what would be the consequences and the resultant effects of English being replaced by technology or fingered kind of language of speech that you're texting. And that in general English or any language has taken a big hit because of the social media platforms, and these days people are using lots of emojis, and instead of using the actual language or content language, they're using shortcuts. And so if you look at this slide, Middle English 11 to 1500, we find William the Conqueror, the Duke of Normandy. He, part of modern France, invaded and conquered England. The new conqueror called the Normans brought with them a kind of French, which became the language of the royal court. So French remained the most important exclusive language of the court, ruling and business class. For a period, there was a kind of linguistic class division. That means aristocrats and the rich people, moneyed people, influential people would speak only French, and the others, commoners, courtesans, and they would be speaking English. But what happened there was a cross-cultural communication, and those people who were serving these French aristocrats, they even married and they used to serve them, and that's how the English was getting slowly making inroads into French society. And it was being liked also by, so in 14th century English became dominant in Britain again, but with many French words added. The problem was that French remained the paramount language, and English served as a subsidiary language at the time. So this is Middle English. Is a Middle English time. It was a language of the great poet Chaucer, but it would still be difficult for native English speaker to understand today. So if you read Canterbury Tales, it would draw a lot of exertion from your side. Look at this example, Middle English by Chaucer. And you find most of the words, they have the endings, extra endings. Those endings have been dropped now, and those endings actually are replaced by prepositions now. So it was easy at the time, but like you can see this book, right, as he read, R-E-D-D-E, and then took him on the Cheeke. So this E is an additional, and it needs to be dropped, but it meant something there. Actually, it meant the preposition that we're using today, on, to, at. These kinds of prepositions were used for. So modern English 1500 to 18, towards Middle English, a sudden and distinct change in pronunciation occurred. And that's why I mentioned about, that's called the Great Vowel Shift. Now earlier, there was a lot of emphasis, and longer vowels were used as stressed and emphatic, and longer and louder. Now it's started becoming shorter and shorter, and this great vowel shifts from the 16th century. The British had contact with many people from around the world. This partially happened because of the business and trade relations with Britishers with the rest of the world, and coming into contact with those people who didn't have English as their first language. Either they had French or Portuguese or Greek, or and those people, and they started influencing the Britishers and the English in England. I will come to the point where we see them, how Americans also influenced the English language, to the extent that they came up with their own variety, although not much different from the English the way were used in England, but of course it stood distinct from English that was used in England. So this vowel shift could be said to be a landmark, or a very prominent happening change in the. Why? Because this helped to standardize the accent and pronunciation of English worldwide, and this made it rather a bit less tedious, and then gave it a kind of uniformity all over the world, and people found it easier to speak with short and shorter vowels, and 5 vowels apart from Y. So this is how the pronunciation of English was affected. Sometimes my students leave me flabbergasted, because they keep on asking questions. Teacher, especially the students whose mother tongue, first language is altogether different and has no match with English, bizarre kind of pronunciation, spelling rules, and even grammar rules. And I find myself at a loss. Fix how to explain, because I can't go into the complete historical ramifications of English dynamism and changes that are taking place over hundreds and hundreds of years. Okay, so when we come to the invention of printing press, that was meant a common language in print. That means people could read and speak, and same kind of alphabets, same kind of prints, and standard prints. Books became cheaper, more people learned to read. Printing also brought standardization to English. Spelling, grammar rules became more or less fixed. And the dialect of London, where most publishing houses were, became the standard, because the kind of books that were being released and copied, and multiple copies, and so many libraries came up. Libraries used to lend the books at cheaper prices, and you could even be a beneficiary as a reader, free of cost. And people started visiting libraries off and on, primarily not because they wanted to add knowledge, because they wanted to read manuscripts, Bibles, all kinds, all versions of Bible, like John, Bible, and they were interested in reading sermons. They were interested in getting to know the underlying morals behind all the psalms and the sermons through. So whether it's Luke or John or other Bibles, they were all translated, and they were made public. They were made popular and familiar. In fact, I'll go to the extent of saying that it was customary for each Christian at the time to acquire a copy of Bible and keep it at his home, and visit church regularly, at least on Sunday. and that gave a real fillip to the acquisition of the language, spread the language, and over usage of the language, and that really made English hugely popular among commoners, not among aristocrats alone. So publishing houses really gave a lot of boost to the spread of the language, and it also made standardized texts. In 1604, the first English dictionary was published. That's another thing that brought uniformity in the kind of. Now this is the one of the plays by Shakespeare, Hamlet, Prince of Denmark. You find some of the words there appear to be bizarre in the spelling, and even the sound altogether different, because Shakespeare was still under influence of the Old English, and he took the liberty of not only adding around 1,000 of his own words. Those were his own coinage, in fact, and he didn't bother to alter the formation of the words there. And there are so many idioms and proverbs and words of wisdom that Shakespeare gave us through his four hugely popular plays like Hamlet, Othello, King Lear, and there are the others, comedy like As You Like It, and Midnight Summer Dream, and Midsummer Night's Dream, and there are so many works that regularly and repeatedly have been not only researched, and in fact thousands of research books have been produced just on Shakespeare alone. So Shakespeare being associated with theater, and he himself was an actor, and he came from an influential family. I mean, it was not that he was a commoner. He was from a privileged family, and he made sure that he popularized his theater, and he really lent a helping hand to the spread of English. As so he's the next most prominent figure, if I reckon, and he's a force to reckon with in any term, in any sense. Now late modern English has many words arising from two principal factors. What contributed to the phenomenal increase of the lexis of English is, like Industrial Revolution. You know that England was the most powerful nation on earth at that time. The marine, the biggest navy, with its largest trade, with its contacts with all parts of the globe. It has trade connections, trade routes through waterways, and one of the most formidable navy ships, which used to frequent the shores of not only Arabians for importing spices and perfumes and muslins from China, and India's and cottons and those kind of goods. And so they had a contact either through business establishments or through trades or through import or exports, and that was influenced English a lot. So Industrial Revolution, they needed lots and lots of production machineries were brought into being, and that's how we came to add so many new terminologies like piston and nuts and bolts, or hydraulic pressure and engines and machines, and those terminologies which are useful. And then there were manuals to how to operate those machines. The manuals were written in the standard English format. Another thing was the technology, and everywhere there were Renaissance, with the coming of the Renaissance in Europe, the newer ideas and newer inventions, discoveries were made, and everywhere there was an opening of the knowledge, and there was printing of the books, newer books, new philosophy, and translation. That really was going with so much of force that Bible was translated the most translated, even today, Bible is the most translated holy book on earth, probably next to Quran. So the translation is a real, a boost to the spread of the knowledge and to the. But translation was not restricted to the transliteration alone. There were, philosophers and guys. They translated not only the theme but also wrote, commentaries on them in order to make it plain and simple for the people to understand. So the British Empire at its highest covered 1/4 of the Earth's surface. And you know that the sun never set in the British Empire. And of course, English has attained the same paramount position today. The sun never sets in the world of English. And English language adopted foreign words from many countries. In fact, it has gained kind of notoriety. It stole, it adopted, it derived, and it accumulated, and it so generously acquired the words from so many different languages that it's getting enriched on every now and then. Just to make my case stronger, even this pandemic has added so many newer words to, because there is a need to come up with those terminologies to explain in scientific world. So the social distancing and epidemiology and this kind of, these are new too. And this is how, any language gets to, make inroads into newer areas of. So this Germanic, parent language, in the north they have Norwegian, Swedish, and Celtic, Italic, Baltic, Albanian. In the south, in the west, we found English, Frisian, Flemish, Dutch, Afrikaners, German, and Yiddish. In the east, we have Gothic, Greek, and Europeans, they also had the influences from the Germanic, language, like Armenian and Indo-Iranian, and this is definitely Germanic family language. English happens to be a member of this Germanic family language. That's why it is so complicated to get to know the roots of each word that we use in English these days. Europeans, there are varieties of so many Englishes now, particularly like American English is quite influential. Why? Because American English, when it broke away from against the independence, there are so many states, and some of the states they retain the inviolate English dictions and its vocabs from England, and they're the ones who preserve those words in their entirety. So we need not blame Americans to have substantialized English or made it simpler and alter the spellings. And in fact, on the other hand, Americans have tried hard to retain its originality and kept the nectar of English sealed. The other biggest force that has dominance and gave the rise to the English is the cinema. Hollywood, although Indian Bollywood is the largest producer cinema, but Hollywood has the far-reaching influence on every individual on the earth, and they have their own television, social media, television, popular music, and technology, including internet. As we know that 80 to 90% of the content created on the internet primarily stems from English alone. There may be some other languages being added now and then, but it's English alone that has its sway over the other language. But there are many varieties of English around the world, including the Australian English, New Zealand English, Canadian English, South African English, Indian English, and there are so many other varieties as well. So, when we talk of varieties, every now and then we are getting newer varieties. Some expression British called Americanism, in fact, they were British originally. So Spanish influenced American English. We have all other countries having lots of influences. And if I have to tell you the number of people who are, 3 cycles of English speaking countries, the outer, inner core circle that includes English speaking countries Then we have outer circle, like communities like native speakers English, but they are widespread. A second language, I mean, like, let me show you the ring of this outer cycle. Inner cycle, you have USA, UK. Outer cycle, you have India, Nigeria, and all those kind of developing countries which have adopted English as almost at par with the national language or as a second language.